Flat Earth Stupidity Exposed by Malcolm Bowden.
I uploaded my first YouTube video on geocentricity in October 2011. About 2014, realizing that I was prepared to support unpopular views, I began receiving requests to seriously examine the flat Earth model. I looked at a few YouTube videos and articles, but saw immediately the huge flaws in their so-called evidence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was absolute nonsense and a highly developed form of sophistry, the use of deceptive arguments in order to mislead. The whole setup was so foolish that I refused to discuss it any further. So frequent were these requests in the comment section of YouTube, I bluntly refused to deal with the subject further. But the requests did not stop. I eventually felt that I should make a video exposing the gross weaknesses of their various arguments, simply to get the subject out of my system, hence this video. I will look at several of their evidences and display the weaknesses of their arguments. Not that that will have any effect upon their closed minds or silence their propaganda. The gullibility of some people never ceases to astonish me. Why they should be like this, I will consider at the end of this video. The Bedford level measurements. Reference 1 at the end of this video. The Bedford level is a 6-mile straight canal. The formula for the dip due to the Earth's curvature is, in feet, 0.667 times distance in miles squared. In 6 miles, the dip would be 6 times 6 times 0.667 equals 24 feet. In 1838, Rowbotham, with a telescope 8 inches above the water, claimed a rowboat was in full view when it was 6 miles away. The dip should have put it 24 feet lower, i.e., the top of its 15-foot mast should have been about 9 foot below the horizon if the Earth was a sphere. How could Rowbotham have seen the rowboat and mast 6 miles away? How can ships and cities be seen when the curvature of the Earth should have put part of it, or all of them, well below the horizon? The answer: it is due to the refraction, the bending of light as it passes through different densities of air. When a navigator looks through his sextant or an astronomer looks through his telescope, they measure the angle between the star and the horizon, angle A, the black dotted line. But the light has been bent downwards as it enters increasingly dense air, the green line. They have to allow for this by subtracting a refraction correction angle, B, if they want to know the exact angle that the light is coming to them, C. In astronavigation, you have to subtract a small refraction correction angle that varies with the angle of the star above the horizon. Reed's Nautical Almanac gives a table for this correction. At 90 degrees vertically upwards, the light is at right angles to the atmosphere and the correction is 0 degrees. At 45 degrees above the horizon, the correction is 0.93 minutes of arc. When horizontal equals 0 degrees, i.e. just skimming above the sea level, the correction is minus 34.9 minutes of arc, i.e. the star is below the horizon by about half a degree. This correction is well known to astronomers, scientists, and celestial navigators, yet it is totally ignored by the flat earthers. Indeed, Wikipedia states, refraction is strongly affected by temperature gradients, which can vary considerably from day to day, especially over water. In extreme cases, usually in springtime, when warm air overlies cold water, refraction can allow light to follow the Earth's surface for hundreds of kilometers. This means that refraction, due to the increased density of the air, allows objects to be seen that are well below the level of the horizon. Thus, telescopes show cities, ships, etc. below the horizon, not because the Earth is flat, but because the rays of light are bent downwards. This is independent of the further correction that is made for the height of the observer above sea level. The curvature of the Earth's horizon. Flat earthers consistently claim that no matter how high you go, you cannot detect any curvature of the Earth's horizon. It is very difficult to detect the very small degree of curvature by eye, hence their claim. There is an interesting article, reference 3, by Lynch, that deals with this subject in considerable depth. It will be sufficient to summarize it with two statements that set out his basic conclusion. Thus, the altitude necessary to visually detect curvature would seem to be between about 14,000 and 35,000 feet, and passengers on the Concorde at 60,000 feet routinely marveled at the curvature of the Earth. Pilots of Concorde have seen it. One said the curvature was detectable when the straight edge of a piece of paper was held up to it. Yet again, flat earthers deceive people with their claims of no curvature, simply because the height you have to reach to detect it by eye is not possible for the ordinary person to check. I give two photos from the internet, presumably taken through a Concorde window. I have added two red lines to show the very small rise in the centre of the horizon. Flat earthers usually claim this curvature is due to the distortion caused by the window thickness. Eclipses of the moon. Every time that the moon passes into the shadow of the Earth on the moon is always a perfect circle, as would be expected if the Earth is a sphere. This happens at any time of day when any part of the Earth is facing the sun. A sphere is the only shape that, no matter how you turn it, it always casts a circular shadow, proving that the Earth is a sphere. This has been known for millennia. How do flat earthers explain that fact?
Map projections. One of the happy hunting grounds of flat earthers is that of pointing out the discrepancies in the various map projections, of which there are many. Mercator, polar, Bartholomew's, Mollyweed's equal area, azimuthal equidistant, Winkler's triple, and Lambert's, etc. The Earth is definitely a sphere, and the correct representation of this is to make a sphere and slightly curving pre-printed sections of paper, placing them on the sphere to produce the well-known globe of the Earth with its various countries. The problem then is that this solid shape is not suitable for navigational use, which really needs flat maps for easy mass printing and that can be placed upon a table. In order to turn a sphere into a flat surface for easy printing, some distortion is inevitable. You can see the distortion in some of these projections. Mercator's projection. This is one of the most frequently used. Its main distortion is in the polar regions at the top and bottom of the map. The snow-covered land of Antarctica appears as a long, large area, usually coloured white. Lands near these poles also appear much longer east to west than they really are. In one presentation, a commentator, looking like a professor, seriously pointed out that on Mercator's projection, Greenland looked as large as Africa, when actually it was only a fraction of its size. This was claimed to demonstrate just how deceptive modern maps were, and not to be trusted. As I will show, their own maps are ridiculous and bear no resemblance whatsoever to the real world.
Similarly, a north polar projection distorts lands towards the South Pole. This is the projection favoured by flat earthers, because the South Pole appears on it as a white line completely surrounding the whole map. This is a perfectly normal distortion of this particular form of projection of a spherical Earth, but this is completely ignored by flat earthers. They then concoct a ridiculous fantasy about the movement of the sun and moon over this flat area, which we examine next. I could not help laughing at one flat earth presenter, who in the course of a serious talk said that one of the problems facing map makers was converting a sphere to a flat surface. He obviously did not realize that he had admitted that the Earth was a sphere to begin with. He was quite unaware that he had effectively shot himself in the foot. Flat Earth drawings. Here the claims become so bizarre that I do not know where to begin. Here is a typical drawing of a flat Earth model taken from one of the many internet sites. In this picture I have added some colour and clarifications for a better understanding of their claims. Note that the South Pole ice sheet surrounds the whole Earth. Note also that the Sun circles the North Pole and that it illuminates different portions of the planet on a 24-hour cycle. You might like to pause here and read the description. What should be obvious is that the sun never sets on the flat Earth. They say that it lights up the local area of the Earth over which it is situated, but surely the sun cannot direct its light only downwards, over the local area. The Earth's circumference is 24,901 miles, and this would be the distance from the South Polar ice up to the North Pole and then down to the other side of the South Pole ice boundary. I have shown this in a section of the flat Earth world, which is roughly in the correct proportions of the flat Earth model. The Sun is circling about 3,000 miles above the Earth. Imagine an observer at the foot of the ice wall at the South Pole. The furthest that the Sun can be from him is the left-hand winter sun. Calculation shows that this sun is still about 8 degrees above the horizon and should be easily seen. To get an idea of this 8 degrees, hold a ruler about 24 inches away from your eye. A vertical distance of 3.5 inches will give you an angle of 8 degrees, and you will see that the sun would be clearly visible even when it is at its maximum distance away from an observer. The sun at the equator. In the flat Earth model, the sun never goes below the horizon. Yet those living near the equator see the sun rising straight up from the horizon in the east and setting straight down in the west. Antarctica. They speak as if no man has ever set foot on Antarctica, so what about the South Pole expeditions of Scott and Amundsen and many others in recent years? Have they never heard of them? Both Scott and Amundsen used astronavigation to determine the exact location of the South Pole, centred as it is in the midst of a flat plain of ice. Astronavigation uses the positions of the Sun, Moon, Star and planets, and is based upon a spherical Earth, taking sextant elevations of them to locate their precise position. When Scott reached the South Pole, Amundsen's flag locating his position of the South Pole was only half a mile away from Scott's position.
surprisingly close considering the conditions they were working under. My question is, how do flat earthers explain these astronavigated positions if they claim that the South Pole cannot be reached?
Bridges. It is claimed that when building a long bridge, no allowance is ever made for the curvature of the earth. When setting out each pier in succession, no correction in the levels is ever used, proving the earth is flat. What those using this argument have forgotten is that the theodolite they use has a spirit level, and this is always controlled by the gravity pull towards the center of the earth. Thus, as the level of each pier is set out, they automatically follow the curvature of the earth, as we see here. Plane flights. In a similar way, pilots do not make adjustments in their flying height for the earth's curvature, so the earth must be flat. But the plane knows its height above the earth by using the air pressure, which it keeps constant, and the autopilot keeps the plane at the same air pressure. But the air pressure also follows the curvature of the earth. So again, no correction is needed. I had virtually finished the video, but looked again at some flat earth sites. I will briefly deal with a few more spurious evidences for a flat earth. The rays of the sun. One YouTube video said that if the sun is such an immense distance away, the light rays should be parallel to each other, yet quite clearly they are not, as seen in this photo. This proved that the sun was very much nearer to us than the 93 million miles we are told about. The real truth is quite the opposite. In this picture, from a flat earth website, of the parallel lamps on either side of a road, the lamps nearer you are, say, 10 meters apart, and they are still 10 meters apart in the far distance. So parallel lines are not parallel when viewed along their length. Flat earthers make great play about perspective and how it proves the earth is flat. It does nothing of the sort. They are just deliberately muddying the waters with such ridiculous and misleading claims. Clouds behind the sun. Pictures like the one on the right are claimed to show that the sun is very near to the earth. The explanation is that when a cloud is fairly transparent, the power of the sun shines through it, and this light exceeds the capacity of the camera to register any slight shading from the clouds, so it shows completely white. One website demonstrates this with the first photo of some film negatives equals thin clouds, and a wire equals pylons, etc. In front of a hole equals the sun. When a bright light is switched on behind the hole, the negative and the wire seem to go behind the hole. So the sun is not a few thousand miles away, but is 93 million miles away. Some subjects covered. In this video, I have tried to reply to some of the main proofs that flat earthers present to support their views. There are others that they give, but I hope that those I deal with are more than adequately rebutted, sufficient to demolish their case. In every instance, I have found that there are huge flaws in their arguments, and I have no doubt whatsoever that this would apply to all their evidence. What has truly amazed me has been the sheer volume of the sudden rise of this propaganda on the internet, and the brash and confident way it is presented. I feel that there is something quite suspicious about the whole subject, and that there is a concerted program to swamp the internet with this foolish theory. Why that is taking place, we will now consider. The implications for the integrity of flat earth proponents. Let us pause and stand back to consider what this evidence demonstrates about those who propagate the flat earth theory. I have shown that every point that they make to support their view can be easily refuted by referring to evidence that is well known and freely available to the public. With this in mind, there are only two possible reasons why flat earthers continue to maintain their views. They are either 1. Woefully ignorant of scientific facts that are common knowledge amongst anyone with a grain of scientific background, or 2. Knew of these facts, yet deliberately ignored them, and therefore were guilty of deliberate deception of the unwitting public. Therefore, they cannot avoid the obvious conclusion that flat earthers are either ignorant or deceivers. They must choose one or other of these two charges. I care not which one they choose. Whichever they choose, it will put a huge question mark over their reliability and truthfulness in their presentations of their evidence to support their case. The question must then be faced: what drives them to hold to this untenable position despite the evidence against them? Again, there are two reasons that could explain their attitude. Motivation of flat earthers, a first possible cause. I noted that in 2015 there had been a considerable rise in the publicity of the flat earth theory. Geocentric evidence has been available for many years, but in recent years interest in it started to grow fast. Seeing the sudden rapid rise in the number of sites and references to the flat earth view, I began to suspect that there was a definite movement to swamp the internet with this flat earth nonsense in order to A. distract people from the growing interest in geocentricity, and B. to smear it with the charge of being similar to the flat earth theory. Swamping the media with alternative theories in order to distract from the real truth has happened many times before. I have seen it in the Jack the Ripper murders of 1888 and the assassination of J.F. Kennedy. The mass media has consistently claimed that geocentrists are just as crazy as flat earthers. Therefore, as the first possible motive some people may have is to deliberately spread this false theory in order to distract from and cast ridicule on the geocentric movement. There is, however, a second possible motive. A second possible motivation. For those not knowingly involved in any deliberate scheme to subvert public opinion, but who are unwittingly acting as Lenin's useful idiots, I would place the root of the motivation for advocating the flat earth model to its effect of generating a sense of pride in the holder. Many feel that they are insignificant in the eyes of the world, and therefore they will be strongly attracted to any movement or cause that will boost their ego. It can give them a strong sense of purpose in their otherwise boring or mundane lives. Anyone who holds to a very unusual cause or belief, whether well supported or not, can easily develop a sense of superiority over ordinary people. He feels that he has a secret and superior knowledge to the millions of ordinary people who believe the lies that the experts feed to the masses by their complete control over the mass media. If he makes his own video on YouTube or gives talks on the subject, his ego will receive an even greater boost. This desire to feed this feeling of superiority over ordinary people is so strong in some that they are only too willing to be persuaded by whatever evidence is placed before them. Thus, a second possible reason is the ego boost that they get from being different from the common herd. Now, I am very aware that the reaction of all flat earthers to such a strong and demeaning charge will be twofold. Firstly, they will say to me, "Such a charge is completely groundless. I am an intelligent and rational being who has some knowledge of science. I have looked at the evidence and have found it convincing. Therefore, you must retract such an outrageous claim immediately, with grovelling apologies." This, however, I will not do until they have answered point by point all the evidence that I have set out above. If they can convince me that they have verifiable and provable counter-evidence, then I will retract this video and make an apology. Until that happens, I will maintain my charge. Secondly, they will make the counter-charge, "Are you not also personally promoting unpopular and controversial views, geocentricity, true biblical counseling, etc., for exactly the same reason, to boost your ego?" This I refute. My promotion of these subjects resulted in truly huge criticisms, abuse, and ostracism, the most wounding being from fellow Christians. So those who charge me with adopting controversial subjects as an ego boost could not be more wrong if they tried. The criticisms that I have received were daunting and the very opposite of being an ego boost. I can only assure both my critics and my supporters that at rock bottom my sole aim is to discover the truth on any important subject, and that involves the whole of the Christian faith as well as scientific matters. If it conflicts with popular views, whether secular or Christian, then so be it. This pursuit of truth, come what may, is vitally important to me. I have found that when pursued to the end, that God is always there. Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So all truth will lead to Christ. He is the second person in the glorious Trinitarian God, a God who is infinite, eternal, and unchanging in his being, wisdom, power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. And I would add, beauty and humility. The Bedford level measurements. Reference 1 at the end of this video. The Bedford level is a 6-mile straight canal. The formula for the dip due to the Earth's curvature is, in feet, 0.667 times distance in miles squared. In 6 miles, the dip would be 6 times 6 times 0.667 equals 24 feet. In 1838, Rowbotham, with a telescope 8 inches above the water, claimed a rowboat.
Flat Earth Stupidity Exposed by Malcolm Bowden.
I uploaded my first YouTube video on geocentricity in October 2011. About 2014, realizing that I was prepared to support unpopular views, I began receiving requests to seriously examine the flat Earth model. I looked at a few YouTube videos and articles, but saw immediately the huge flaws in their so-called evidence.
Was in full view when it was 6 miles away. The dip should have put it 24 feet lower, i.e. the top of its 15-foot mast should have been about 9 foot below the horizon if the Earth was a sphere. How could Rowbotham have seen the rowboat and mast 6 miles away? How can ships and cities be seen when the curvature of the Earth should have put part of it, or all of them, well below the horizon?
Weaknesses of their various arguments simply to get the subject out of my system, hence this video. I will look at several of their evidences and display the weaknesses of their arguments. Not that that will have any effect upon their closed minds or silence their propaganda. The gullibility of some people never ceases to astonish me. Why they should be like this, I will consider at the end of this video. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was absolute nonsense and a highly developed form of sophistry. The use of deceptive arguments in order to mislead. The whole setup was so foolish that I refused to discuss it any further. So frequent were these requests in the comment section of YouTube, I bluntly refused to deal with the subject further. But the requests did not stop. I eventually felt that I should make a video exposing the gross